Olympic Park Stadium was a multi-purpose outdoor stadium located on Olympic Boulevard in inner Melbourne. The stadium was built as an athletics training venue for the 1956 Olympics, a short distance from the MCG, which served as the Olympic Stadium. Over the years it was the home of rugby league side Melbourne Storm and the A-League team, Melbourne Victory. Throughout its life the stadium played host to athletics. Olympic Park Stadium was located in Olympic Park, which is part of the Melbourne Sports and Entertainment Precinct. Olympic Park Stadium was demolished in 2011 and replaced with an Australian rules football ground. This new ground has been used by the Collingwood Football Club for training purposes, it being adjacent to the Westpac Centre. As of the 2016 season, Collingwood are using Olympic Park as one of the home grounds for the VFL side of the club. Former usage. The stadium was one of the largest in Victoria, primarily suited to a rectangular configuration, which made it ideal for hosting rugby league, rugby union, soccer and gridiron matches, whilst the larger Etihad Stadium and Melbourne Cricket Ground stadiums also support rectangular configuration due to their oval-shaped grounds. Viewing conditions are less ideal. The larger 30,050-seat rectangular stadium adjacent to Olympic Park Stadium was completed in May 2010. The stadium had lighting suited for night athletics meets as well as a world-standard athletics track that was refurbished in 1997, with the stadium last being redeveloped in 1998. The athletics track was refurbished again in 2010 for the National Championships. Until 2009, the stadium was home of their team, the Melbourne Storm. It served as the home of Melbourne Victory home games for 2 seasons. Olympic Park had a capacity of 18,500 spectators with 11,000 seats. Athletics. Australian athletes competed on the track for over 50 years and the venue hosted 12 national championships. 13 world records in athletics had been established at the stadium, with pole vaulter Emma George setting 4 between 1995 and 1998. Australian middle distance runner star John Landy featured in a memorable race at the 1956 National Championships, where he stopped during the mile championship to assist the fallen junior champion Ron Clark. Landy's actions, in front of a 22,000-strong crowd, have been described as the finest sporting moment in the history of sport. Landy went on to win the event, with many commentators believing that the stop had cost him the world record. A photograph of the fall was named the best Australian sporting photo of the 20th century, while Landy's conduct was named by the Sport Australia Hall of Fame as the nation's finest sporting moment of the 20th century. The track was host to the most significant athletics meeting in Australia each year, the Athletics Grand Prix Series. Melbourne Meet. Soccer. Olympic Park was the first stadium in Australia to be recognised officially by FIFA as a soccer ground. For the mid-1950s onward, the venue was considered to be the unofficial home of soccer in Victoria. It regularly hosted important games of the Victorian State League, including Doherty Cup finals and games by overseas touring teams. The stadium also held FIFA World Cup qualification matches, 1993 FIFA World Youth Championship matches, and group matches of the 1956 Olympics football competition. Australia played 34 internationals at Olympic Park for 11 wins. The last international match played at Olympic Park was a friendly against Paraguay on the 15th of June 2000, which Australia won 2-1. It wasn't supposed to host the game, but the game was moved to Olympic Park because the venue that was about to play host to the Soccer International, Colonial Stadium, had an unsafe surface that had caused an Australian Football League match to be moved from Colonial Stadium to the Melbourne Cricket Ground, as well as hosting several National Soccer League Grand Finals. Various soccer clubs used the venue as a permanent or temporary home, such as Melbourne Knights, South Melbourne and Heidelberg United. A league club, Melbourne Victory, also initially played its home games at the venue, before capacity issues saw it move to the much larger Docklands Stadium the following season. Rugby League Game 2 of the 1990 State of Origin series was the first to be played in Melbourne, and the stadium was packed to capacity for New South Wales's victory over Queensland. Capacity for the stadium was up to 25,800 through the use of temporary seating at each end. The stadium also held an NSWRL Premiership match in 1993, when the St. George Dragons defeated the Western Suburbs Magpies 20-8 in front of 11,822 fans. The match was designated as a West's home game. The stadium also hosted an Australia vs New Zealand Test match on 3 July 1991 as part of the 1991 Trans-Tasman Test Series. The match was first rugby league test held in Australia outside of New South Wales or Queensland, with the Kiwis scoring an upset 24-8 win over the world champions in front of 26,900 fans. Olympic Park was the home ground of the Melbourne Storm from 1998 to 2000 and 2002 to 2009. The exception being 2001, when the Storm moved the home games to the larger, 56,347 capacity Telstra Dome, due in part to the Storm's first 3 seasons each having season average attendance of over 13,000. Also attractive in the move was the chance to play indoors due to the stadium having a retractable roof, and also the stadium's ability to move seating closer to the rugby league field. The seating was only moved for one game, however, due to the cost involved and also the damage done to the playing surface, which mostly hosted the Australian Football League. That was the round 21 clash with defending premiers Brisbane. The 32-28 win over the Broncos also saw the Storm's season-high crowd of 15,470. Ultimately, the move to the Docklands was deemed a failure, and with an average season crowd of only 11,981, the Storm decided to move back to Olympic Park, beginning from 2002. Following the move back to Olympic Park, the Storm would play all of the home games and some finals at the venue until moving to the new 30,050 all-seated AAMI Park, built adjacent to Olympic Park, in 2010. During rugby league matches, the Western Grandstand was named the Glenn Lazarus Stand after the Storm's foundation and first premiership-winning captain, while the Eastern Grandstand was named the Tawera Nikau Stand after New Zealand international lock-forward who played 53 games for the Storm, including the 2018-1999 NRL Grand Final win over St George Illawarra in front of a world record rugby league crowd of 107,999 at the Sydney Olympic Stadium. Local fans unofficially dubbed the Northern End's standing room the Marcus By Stand after one of the Storm's most popular players and outstanding wingers. The Melbourne Storm's nickname for the stadium was the Graveyard, due to their excellent record at this stadium. The Storm's first ever home game at the ground was in round 4 of the 1998 season, when 20,522 saw the new team defeat the North Sydney Bears 24-16. The game remains the highest attended Melbourne Storm game at Olympic Park. The highest attended finals game at the stadium was also the Storm's first ever finals game when 18,247 saw the Sydney Roosters win 26-12 in the 1998 major preliminary semi-final. Melbourne Storm moved out in 2010, as the stadium was always poorly suited for rugby league because the dimensions of the pitch were too small. They played the last game there in round 25 the 29th of August 2009, winning 38-4 against the Sydney Roosters. Rugby League Test matches. List of Rugby League Test and World Cup matches played at Olympic Smart Stadium. Rugby Union. The stadium has hosted international rugby union matches, and in 2007 was home to the now-defunct Melbourne Rebels in the only season of the Australian Rugby Championship. Victorian Rugby Union returned to the stadium in 2011 when the Melbourne Rebels played a warm-up for the debut Super Rugby season against the Pacific Island Kingdom of Tonga. Other sports. The stadium also hosted Gridiron Victoria Vic Bowl between 1985 to 1993. In January 1995, Olympic Park was used for motorcycle speedway when it hosted a round of the Australian Speedway Masters Series. The 400 metres speedway track was laid out over the existing athletics track. The Masters Series included the world's best speedway riders, including reigning world champion Tony Rickardsson from Sweden, 1993 world champion Sam Ermolenko of the United States, multiple long-track world champion Simon Wigg of England, and Australia's best riders including Lee Adams, Craig Boyce, Jason Crump and Jason Lyons. Events. The King of Pop Michael Jackson performed a sold-out concert at the stadium on the 13th of November 1987 during his Bad World Tour. Bon Jovi played here in November 1995 during the These Days Tour. Decline. Being an Australian rules football state, Victoria lacked a rectangular stadium of a size suitable for the growing numbers of attendees at the sports using Olympic Park. There were plans for Olympic Park to be turned into a 40,000-seat rectangular stadium in the 1990s, with the main reason being the loss of international soccer, rugby league state of origin games, and rugby union games to the much larger Melbourne Cricket Ground. However, these venues had less ideal viewing conditions for rectangular sports. The redevelopment of Olympic Park never occurred, with the Bracks government revealing in 2005 that a new 20,000-seat rectangular stadium would be built and would be home to Melbourne Victory and Melbourne Storm. Melbourne Victory moved out of Olympic Park during the 2006-07 A-League season due to capacity issues and moved into Docklands Stadium. It was a huge success, with crowd numbers of over 20,000 and giving the stadium a major summer tenant which the stadium previously lacked, due to the crowd average exceeding the proposed capacity of the rectangular stadium. They declared they would not play at the rectangular stadium unless the capacity was increased. In May 2007, the proposed capacity was increased to 31,000. Melbourne Storm played at Olympic Park until the 2009 NRL season and used Docklands Stadium as a temporary home ground until May 2010 when the new stadium opened. On the 4th of March 2008, it was reported that Australian Rules Football Club president Eddie Maguire was attempting to take over Olympic Park and use the facilities as a training ground for his Collingwood team. On the 25th of November 2009, it was announced that Olympic Park would be demolished, with a new home for Athletics Victoria being built at Lakeside Stadium. Collingwood would have exclusive access to an MCG-sized training oval at the Olympic Park site. Demolition of the venue began in late 2011 and has now been completed, with a new MCG-sized Australian football training oval in its place.